broadcast. Um, Man, so I have a couple little notes. Thank you, first of all, Trish. That's super awkward, and I really appreciate you doing that. One of the joys of being the treasurer. We always want to be transparent, but we also want to let you know where we're at. So we have money in the bank, and God has been gracious. We're trying to be good stewards, and a lot of that is due to her hard work and the hard work of our board and board of directors and leaders. So we want to thank you for that. Hey, how you doing, Julia? No, sorry. We love Julia so much. We love all of our kids. Where's Nora? She out playing? All right. We trust her to go. We don't have, just so you know, that's one of the things we prayed about. Pray about our church. We don't have a huge kids program right now. We don't have a ton of kids right now. What a great place, though. That's why we do. One of the main reasons why when we can be outside, we're outside, is so that moms and kids can play back here and maybe still hear. And we will never, and I mean this, I promise, we will never be upset by the sound of kids. Just because, man, that means something's happening, right? And apparently we're never upset by the sound of dogs from last week. I'm a little disappointed. There will never be, I could never compete with either of those. I'll never be able to repeat that goodness that happened. So anyway, thank you guys. We appreciate that. And appreciate you guys being here. Peter and Doug and Henry. Now that may be a little bit more hunker down, duck and cover. I'm sure that's fine. That's nothing to worry about. Kitsap County, what could it be? But I appreciate you guys leading worship. It's just powerful. There's nothing better, besides you guys being just like crazy good musicians, there's nothing better than seeing you worship. And that leads us to worship. I'm going to challenge us. There's nothing harder to like speak. I did not like speaking just in the room to the camera. I love having you guys here. And I'm sure, I'm not a musician, but I'm sure leading worship when no one is worshiping with you must be super hard. So here's your challenge to help worship continue to grow and be fantastic, is that you sing. Even if you don't sound good, even if you're not as good as Peter or Henry or Doug. I've never heard Doug sing, but probably we don't want to, do we? You probably can do it. Kind of a Phil Collins kind of a thing. But even if you're not great singing, sing along, man. There is something about that thing when we sing together. And again, I don't want to make it too like miraculous, but it's kind of miraculous, right? So sing, join us. Let's all worship together. That is what we're doing that for. So thank you. Next week, Peter's going to be gone, and Henry is going to lead, and I'm so excited. I'm sorry I have to say it. Joe is going to play guitar, our sound guy, Joe. Joe's like, I may not be doing that now. So I'm so pumped for that. I can hardly wait. And I'm going to be doing the flute. That's not true. I'm not doing that. Lastly, but not leastly, I love that people come out to this spot. It's so cool. If you are newish, I'm going to ask you, we don't do like roll or anything like that, but if you wouldn't mind, you don't no pressure, but or even if you've been here for a while, we have these little prayer sheets. Please give us how we can pray for you, but also maybe your contact information. I swear to you, I will not inundate you with emails or with spam, but we would just like to be able to stay in contact or answer questions if we have any of that. We will be having kind of our next steps class, not really a membership class, but it's just a little bit about who we are, start in September. But again, if you have questions about us, anyway, if you want to use one of those prayer sheets to give us your contact information, or if you've changed, some of you have been around for a while, if you changed email or phones or any of that stuff, please put that in so we can make sure we get information out to all of you. We've been doing this series this summer called Simple Church. And I said last week I was stunned, and I swear Google is listening to me as I speak, because I got even more stuff, series stuff and books called Simple Church, more ads for Simple Church stuff this week. And again, this isn't taken from anyone else, but I think pastors, we were going through kind of the pandemic, that we were thinking about, what do we do when we come back? And most of us came to the conclusion, probably less. Not that we don't want to do stuff for people or do programs, but we need to really focus on what's super important. That's what we all missed, right? I mean, I'm sure we missed some of the extra stuff, of course. That's great. We love doing it. But what we really missed was each other. And these three things from the book of Acts, from the book of Acts in chapter 2, we kind of picked these three things. A simple church is one, and some of this may be aspirational. We may not be there yet, but we're trying. A simple church is one that shares with each other. I love the part in there that it goes house to house sharing meals. That's kind of what this summer suppers thing is. We're going to randomly kind of put you in a small group. There's no agenda. There's no Bible study. You don't have to share your deepest sin. It really is a chance to just have a meal together. Something happens when we have a meal. It breaks down some barriers. You see somebody slurp spaghetti or try and take too big of a bite of a biscuit, there are some walls that come down at that moment. And so we want you to be able to share with each other. So a simple church shares with each other our stuff, our meals, our food, our time, our compassion, our lives. We share with each other and we share with our community. That's one of the things that the church is supposed to do. And second, they said they were in awe of God. We want to be a place that worships them. And the way we worship better, we keep saying, the way we are in awe of God more, the way we grow in that is by knowing God. And how do we know God? We know the Son. We know Jesus. The more you know Jesus, the more you will not be able to help being in awe of God. And we want to be a family that knows Jesus, that knows God. And as we grow close to Jesus, we grow more and more in awe of who he is and who God is. And thirdly, we're a church that grows. We want to be a simple church, the one that grows. We grow personally. We grow closer to God. Our soul grows. We grow in discipline. We grow in care. We grow in love. And I think that that'll help us grow as a group, as a family. And again, I always say this, we do not believe this is the only church that somebody should go to. We would love for this church to grow in numbers, but that's not our goal. In fact, it would be a win if you get to know someone and you are sharing with them and you are in awe of God around them and you are living Christ and you're walking and following and acting like Jesus, and they kind of finally, eventually, maybe after years go, hey, that's something I would like to be a part of. We would love for them to be a part of this family, but if there's another church family, there are a lot of good ones in this area that they end up at, that's a win. That's a win for the kingdom. You know, I'm partial. I love us, right? But I want you to know we're in it together. So we want to be a place that grows the kingdom of God. And then we talked about living a simple faith, trusting God. That's all it boils down to, as we looked at the book of James and living out this faith, living out what it means to really trust God in our practical daily life. And now we've been doing the series, Grow Your Soul. Again, I have learned there is a weird underground of garden people. And it's made me actually probably try and dig down, no pun intended, to the meat of gardening and more on scripture, because the reality is I will never know as much as you guys do about gardening, because once we start talking about that, you guys know a lot, and it freaks me out, frankly, a little bit. But we're talking about this idea using the plant analogy that it takes 4 things for a plant to grow: dirt, water, sun, and seeds, or fruit. And so we've talked about the value of gardening, this idea of cultivating, how this is ancient. That's what the early people did. That's what life was all about, is gardening and cultivating. And there's something inside us that when we garden, it connects generations, it connects people, it connects us to our past, and it connects us to our future across cultures and situations and generations. There's a psychological, emotional, and mental, and physical, and spiritual gain, spiritual value to gardening. Getting your hands dirty. It's good for your soul. And although most of what we talk about on Sunday morning in these messages is allegory, is a little bit of a metaphor, there's some genuine, real, actual benefit to getting out there and working in your garden. And again, I'll throw this out. Maybe it's not necessarily a flower garden or a vegetable garden. Maybe it's mowing your lawn. Maybe it's anything outside in a landscape where we are working in nature, but kind of nature in small. Right? You got into the woods, sometimes it's too big to comprehend, but you take a little piece of the woods and you put it in your backyard, you can kind of study it and understand it and grow in it. And there is genuine growth. We were talking about this book, we've been following this story, and it's telling the story of her grandfather, Ted, who was in World War I, and how he talked about, first we were talking about this idea that they had little guys, British soldiers in World War I in the trenches, made gardens, and they didn't just grow vegetables so they have fresh fruit, they were growing flowers so they would see beauty. And when they would smuggle in seeds, and when they'd have to go up and over out of the trench, they would carry one little plant with them so that when they got to the new trench they could plant their flower again. And talked about how her grandfather came back and had horrible, we would know it today as PTSD. He had been literally in a Turkish prison, was emaciated, came home to his fiancée. She didn't recognize him at the door and ended up putting him in the hospital. And this hospital that he was in had these grounds, these huge gardens, multiple greenhouses, multiple paths, miles of paths, and garden and green space that was what caused him to kind of begin to heal and be able to come back into society, is working and being in that garden. And she said she went back later and to see this place, this hospital that had regenerated and restored her grandfather, and she went back there and it was an industrial park. no sign of the garden, except there were a couple little lakes, ponds, and a little stream. And you could not keep the garden down. No matter what you paved over, no matter what you built, no matter what smog was in the air, that garden was growing again volunteering around the lakes and around the pond. What an amazing story. All it needed was seeds, dirt, water, and sun. That's who we want to be. We've talked about dirt. We've talked about being rooted in good soil, rooted in Jesus Christ. Deep down, that's where we find our strength. And then we talked last week about water, receiving life and grace and mercy and power from Jesus, from water, whether it was from rain or from rivers or from irrigation, that there were some ways that we can be refreshed because of God. And this week we want to talk about sun. This is an amazing place to live in the summer, isn't it? It's an amazing place in other seasons, but the summers definitely make up for the soul-crushing gloom that we experienced the other 9 months. I love being here in the sun, and my wife Deb I say she's solar powered. She kind of is like on this slow descent all through fall and winter, and then spring begins to happen, and then she is like alive as soon as the sun hits. And it is amazing. Not her personality change, but she is so much happier. She's with the kids. And she would admit that to you, that this is her favorite thing in the world, is being in the sun. And one of the cool things about the sun is that it illuminates. We can see. I brought a prop. I never do props. I've talked about this before. I'm colorblind. My son, George, not Henry. My son, George, bought me these colorblind magic. You guys are amazing. They only work, though, in full sunlight. So if I can't watch TV with them. But right now, oh my goodness, I'm actually kind of it's always freaky to me how, like, you're wearing all different clothes. That's so cool. If there's anybody that's colorblind and wants to try them afterwards, here you go. They may or may not work. It depends on the kind of colorblind you are. Yeah. Okay. Oh, we were hoping for a moment. If you're out in the sun, you got to get in direct sun. So you're welcome to wander around if I get boring. Or even if I'm not boring. Go ahead. Ouch.
We want to know, Ron. Go on the sun.
Yeah. Go to it. Yeah, we'll keep going. He just doesn't want to cry in front of you. I do have a sermon, but you know what? We may not get to all of it. I hope that's okay with y'all. Y'all? When have I ever said that? Henry's going back to school. Henry goes back to school on the 20th, 21st of August. Back to Nashville, so I've soaked up a little bit of that. We're going to miss having Henry around here. Yeah, all y'all. That's not just y'all, that's all y'all. But sun illuminates. There's this amazing thing that happens in the summer when we're here. And I just today want to talk briefly about the cycle of the sun. And so we'll start here with the first point is the sunrise. The sunrise. Sunlight, we want to understand that, and I'll kind of give away the analogy at the beginning. Sunlight is God's light, God's heat, God's direction, God's life when we follow the sun. And the sunrise is our introduction to God through Jesus. When we greet the morning, we worship God, we worship Him because we greet the morning. A couple of verses here that I thought were appropriate. Luke 1, 78 through 79 says this, because of the tender mercy of our God, with which the sunrise from on high will visit us, to shine upon those who sit in darkness and the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace. God is the light, and it is being revealed to us, and without Him, we are like people sitting in the dark. And it's like that moment when the sun comes up. In the Old Testament, in Malachi 4:2, talks about God being the sun. But for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing on His wings, and you will go free, leaping with joy like calves led out to pasture. If there was ever a description of Western Washington people when the summer hits, that is it. We are crazy nutball when the sun comes out finally. We are like, have you ever seen cows do that? Cows kind of dance, canter, run. Yeah, Karen, definitely. Karen had them, right? That they come out and they do. It's crazy to see big old huge cows act like little puppies. That's how happy we are when the sunlight hits, when we experience that joy of it being illuminated and heated and lit by God's creation. We need to greet the sun, that idea of greet the morning, greet the day, especially when it has been a long night. I think of some times when I have been through a long period of darkness. Sometimes you're camping and the night seems to go on forever. Have you ever been camping and it's dark and you're laying there in bed and it's uncomfortable and there's a mosquito, you hear off in the and then it comes in, right? That thing that happens, or it's cold or it's scary. You hear weird rustlings, weird noises, and all you're begging for is the sun to come up. And finally it does. And how amazing that is. Or maybe when I was thinking, there have been times when I've been sick, when I was in rehab. Long nights were torture. We'd kind of have our program and we'd talk and share and we'd have some healing during the day. And then we'd lay there and be alone with your thoughts in the dark all night. And I remember begging for the sun to come up in the morning, because just being there by myself, scared and alone in rehab, was not great. But the sun was amazing. Greeting the sun was powerful. It was the end of a dark night, end of a dark season. Our plant analogy, when you go out in the morning, plants and flowers will open up to receive as much sun as they can. Have you seen this? We have dandelions in our yard. A lot of them, embarrassingly, a large amount. I'm just going to come right out and say it. I'm not mowing the lawn right now because the lawn part is dead. But the dandelions are doing great. And in the morning, I wake up, I get out to get my stuff and get out to the car and get ready to go into the office. And I'll think, oh, they're gone, because I can't really see them, because they're just a spindly thing. And then as the sun comes up, the flower opens up. And then I'm like, oh, I've got to do something about that. And then I get home and they're already shut because it's evening. And I'm like, oh, I guess I don't have to do anything about that. But they are opening up to receive as much sun as they can get. The leaves unfurl. We have a couple of plants that, and I asked Deb about it, and she explained some stuff to me, and I went, all right. And then I just completely forgot it, but which ones they were. But the leaves are like little circle, like little cylinders. And in the morning when the sun comes up, they open up to get as much of the sun as they can get. They want to practice photosynthesis. They want to get energy. They want to get food. They want to be warmed by the sun. How does photosynthesis work? Step by step. I actually researched this a little bit this week. Let me read to you. This is how it works. This is from Socratic.org. It is convenient. This will make it simple. It is convenient to divide the photosynthetic process in plants into 4 stages, each occurring in a defined area of the chromoplast. Number 1, absorption of light. Number 2, electron transport, leading to the reduction of NADP plus to NADPH. Duh. 3, the generation of ATP, and 4, conversion of CO2 into carbohydrates, carbon fixation. So clearly, that makes it, I know now we all go, oh, that's how plants work. Basically, it says this: the sun gives the energy. It allows then the nutrients from the soil to be brought up via water through the stems to the plant so it can soak up more energy, taking carbon dioxide and making oxygen. See? Like I said, right? That starts the process. The sun is the energy that starts the process. God is the source of our energy. God is the sun. It brings us all the nutrients we need from the good dirt through our roots that go deep into God, and through the stem that is aided and enabled by the water coming down, the refreshment and the grace and the love from God, and the reaction converts something evil into something good. Sunrise introduces us, the world, to the sun. The sunrise is us being introduced to Jesus. I love this in Matthew 17, Transfiguration. Jesus' face, when they revealed just a tiny little bit of himself, they compared it to the sun. Jesus was actually physically looked like the sun for a minute. He was so bright because he let a little of his glory out. Habakkuk talks about, well, it says this in Habakkuk 3:4, his radiance is like sunlight, talking about God. He has rays flashing from his hand, and there is no hiding of his power. I read a great little blog post from a guy named Robert Carnes. I think it's just a guy. I don't think he's super famous. But he said this: how is God like the sun? So I'm stealing this wholesale, at least his points, the main points. Just a few things. He is infinitely bigger than we are. The sun is huge. It looks tiny, but it's huge. We cannot comprehend the size of the sun. compared to who we are. He says the sun seems far away, and yet it has a direct impact on us. The sun has a tangible, real influence on our life every day. God seems far away, and yet has a tangible, real, usable impact on our life every day. You cannot look directly at him. Why is the sun like God? You shouldn't look directly at the sun. A little tip. We've created special glasses so that we can actually look and maybe even glance at the sun. We cannot. God's glory is so great that every single time someone is exposed to even a slice of his glory, they are radically changed, or they fall on their face and say, I wish I was dead. G.K. Chesterton said it best. God is like the sun. You cannot look at it, but without it, you cannot look at anything else. Next one. Despite what we may think, our world revolves around him. We may think the world revolves around Earth. It doesn't. Or the rest of the universe. No. Our solar system revolves around the sun. Sometimes we think the world revolves around me. It does not. God is in charge. Next one. Even when we don't see him, he is always there. At nighttime, the sun doesn't cease to exist. It is there. God is there even when we don't feel like it. We can always depend on him. He is consistent. We talk about this. The sun will come out tomorrow, sang that famous theologian, Annie. Ecclesiastes, the sun rises and the sun sets. And lastly, he is the shining light in our lives. He is the light to grow and to warm and illuminate. So a little tip, a little application here. Don't worship the sun, worship the source. Don't worship the creation. Don't be distracted. It's easy to see why ancient cultures worship the sun, right? The biggest force of life in the universe, at least in our little world, to us. They worship the wrong thing. When you look in the sky and you see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the forces of heaven, don't be seduced into worshiping them. The Lord your God gave them to the peoples of the earth. Deuteronomy 4:19. He's like already preparing them. Look, you're going to be tempted to worship the sun. Don't do that. Worship the Creator, not the sun. Follow Jesus, not the works or the reflection of Jesus. The Bible is important. It is the Word of God. Leaders who teach are important. People we love, mentors, disciplers, good works, being on mission. All of those are things that flow out of because of the sun, because of the light of Jesus. Don't worship those things. Worship the source of those things. Let's open ourselves like those plants, just like my dandelions. Let's open ourselves to as much Jesus as we can. To know Jesus is to know the Father. If you feel dark, and you feel cold, and you feel like it's night, and you feel like it's winter, maybe you're looking for worshiping and distracted by the wrong thing. Maybe you're looking for the result rather than the source. Get to know Jesus, and you will be in awe. Let's open ourselves up. Let's make sure we are introduced to the sun every morning. S-O-N, not S-U-N. You knew that joke was coming, right? Introduce yourself to the sun every morning. I would throw this out. I get it. You may not be a morning person, and maybe it's better for you to do some quiet time or to read at night. I completely understand that. But there is something about getting up and kind of reading the Bible first. Spending a few minutes, read a psalm, read a chapter. This little reading sheets that we have, read one of those in the morning to start your day off. It's not magic. It doesn't mean the rest of your day is going to be great, but it may mean you're tapped in and you've introduced yourself to God and you've opened your flower, you've opened your leaves to soak up as much Jesus as you can in the morning. Secondly, noon. Noon is the high point of the day. The most sun, it's when most of our work in following the sun happens. Isaiah 58:10 and 11. This is kind of turned into our theme passage. We've used this every week now. This great passage. It says, feed the hungry and help those in trouble. When your light will shine out of darkness and the darkness around you will be as bright as noon. That's as bright as it gets. The most sun. The Lord will guide you continually, giving you water when you are dry and restoring your strength. You'll be like a well-watered garden, like an ever-flowing spring. Again, this is kind of our theme voice, this idea of opening ourselves up at the most heat, being prepared to receive, being a receptive plant that is ready to grow in the middle of the day, following the sun. 1 Corinthians 3, this is on your 1 Corinthians 3, 6 and 7. I planted the seeds in your heart. This is Paul talking, and I love this little idea. He says, I planted the seed in your hearts, and Apollos, another guy, watered it, but it was God who made it grow. In verse 6. Verse 7, I don't think it's on your sheet, but it says, it's not important who does the watering or the planting. What's important is that God makes the seed grow. The Son makes the seed grow. We can plant it, we can water it, we can tend it, but in the end, it takes the big, giant, yellow ball in the sky to give it the energy to grow. Noon is when the sun is the brightest. That's when we have most of our work to do. We must reach out to receive the sun. Be a follower of the sun. This is one of the dumb questions I asked Deb, my gardener. I said, what's the plant that follows the sun? She's like, sunflowers? Oh, right. I'm like, oh, I always thought they were called sunflowers because they looked like the sun. She's like, no, it's because they, and again, you watch them throughout the day. They actually kind of move to go. We have house plants that we do that she has to come in about once a week and turn them around because they just grow towards the window. And then you turn it, and in a couple of days, it grows. Now, you can't, if you sit there and watch it, it doesn't move, but it is following the sun. It's reaching out to, it's looking for power and life and energy and a sustained contact with God as much as possible. When it's noonday, when the sun is out, when it is shining, we need to be reaching and following and trying to soak up as much as we can. I loved this website, sciencing.com. So if you ever have questions about important things, I'm sure that's very legit. It says this, the sun is the main source of energy for almost every living thing on Earth. It gives the plant the light energy it needs to photosynthesize, which converts that light energy into a stable form, glucose, and keeps the plant alive. A byproduct of photosynthesis is oxygen all animals need to survive. Think about that. The stuff we all need in just a real practical way. The sun is the source of all life on this planet, keeps us alive. It is sustaining. And so when the sun is out, we need to grab it. Without light, a plant would not be able to produce the energy it needs to grow. It all comes from God. So there's this cycle that goes on. It is day and night. And in the middle of the day, when the sun is beating down, when it's out, that is the time to reach out to God. That is the time to reach out to the sun, to soak as much as we can so we save a little bit. Take advantage of the full exposure to God. We don't often miss something until it's gone. Those moments when we're dark, when we think it's night, when it's winter in our soul, when we feel like God is far, oftentimes we realize, oh, I wish I would have known this day was coming when I was out and things were great. When I was singing at camp as a kid, singing Kumbaya, when I was sitting at the service worshiping with the worship leaders, when I had a moment silent of God, when I'm reading the scripture and he seemed to speak to me, I wish I would have soaked up more of that in that moment. So now when the cycle of distance, when it's difficult, when the trials of life hit, that I had a reserve. When we're in those good moments, when there's moments when we're close to God, soak it up. When we have the opportunity, the strength and desire to pursue God, let's do it. Get after it, study, pray, talk to each other, learn, serve, contemplate. There may be a dark, dry season soon, whether personally or circumstantially or spiritually, where you will be tested. So we need to grow during noontime, during summer, and that will carry us through the long nights of winter or the long night as we wait for the next sunrise. I'll throw this out too. Artificial light is not enough. There's a big long thing I was going to read, but I'm not going to. Here's the point. Plants that were given artificial light rather than sun could survive, but they did not they were statistically much more likely to die than plants that were in full sunlight. Don't settle for artificial light. Don't settle for Jesus light. Don't settle for Godishness. Don't settle for church life. Don't settle for Christ adjacent life. Soak up the sun of God when it's there. When you want to, when you have the strength to, when you're in that moment, when it is noon, get after it. Recognize the cycles of life. Be ready to adapt and obey in order to take full advantage of growing seasons. That's why gardeners, I think, in Western Washington are so weird. Because you got 3 months to do the whole thing. And then you got to kind of live on that memory and that British guy on HGTV for the rest of the year. Or Cisco. Remember Cisco? All right. I just took us out of the moment. But yes, some of you right now are going, oh yeah, I'm going to look up Cisco. Trust God when we can. We need it for the rest of the year. We need the sun to energize us. our own efforts, and our own strategies and artificial light are not enough. They may seem to work, but they're not nearly as powerful as being exposed to the real God. So store it up. How do you do that? Remember. Make memorials. Moments when you're riding high, when you are close to God, remember it. Consciously choose to remember it. Tell somebody your story, and that will remind you. That sets it in your mind. Maybe even make a physical memorial. There are places I go that bring back the feeling and the memory and the experience of being with God. So those moments where you're close to God and He is real to you, make a memorial. Soak that up in the noontime so we can be ready for our last point, sunset. Sunset. There's still growing to do. There's still work to do even when the sun is not visible. The sun is still there, and so is God. Even when it seems dark. Even at night, the sun still exists. There's work to do. The truth and the knowledge that helps us, that we soak up during the daytime, helps us in the fear and the struggle of night. I think of bulbs, planting bulbs. It always freaked me out. My parents there was a day my mom would actually circle it on the calendar when it was time to go out and plant the bulbs, and then they'd leave in there, and it was always amazing to me, these shriveled up things that looked like little garlic, dead things that she would put out in the garden, and I would go out there and go, aren't you going to do anything with this patch? And she goes, no, there's stuff coming up there. Because they would plant these bulbs, and they sit there underground, and they seem to be dead, and then all of a sudden, like a switch, the light is enough, the ground warms up enough, and it sprouts, and it grows into a beautiful flower. Even when it is dark, we still can grow. There is work to do at night. One of the things is called respiration. At nighttime, plants, that's where they begin to take the energy they stored up all day and begin to produce that CO2. They breathe at night. That happens even when there isn't sunshine. Plants respire all the time, whether it's dark or light. That's why the flowers and the leaves close in, because it's soaked up all the energy, and now it's going to use it. It doesn't want to use that extra energy to escape from those flowers or those leaves. There's a resting and abiding cycle. God calls us to rest. I got to admit, sometimes in our culture, sometimes in our country, sometimes in our world, we esteem the 16-hour day. We think it's, man, if you're not working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, you're probably kind of lazy. That's not healthy, folks. We need to have time off. We need to have Sabbath. We need to have rest. We need to abide in God and abide in Christ. When the sun isn't out, we didn't know that there's still work to be done. But that work oftentimes looks like rest. Give yourself a break. Literally. Take some time off. We see the sun now. We realize the evening is coming. We soak it up. We greet the day. We open up. We soak up as much as we can. We do all the growing we can during the noontime, and at night when it is dark, we live off that. We rest and abide. We take that time to remember God still exists. He is still there. Even if we can't see Him, we can continue in faith and continue to grow and continue to respire and do the work. But we've got to remember, someday we're going to see real light. The passage is here, Isaiah 40:10. Talking about what comes next. There will neither be hunger nor thirst. The searing sun will not reach them anymore. For the Lord in His mercy will lead them, and He will lead them beside cool waters. And Isaiah 60:19. No longer will you need the sun by day, nor the moon to give light by night. For the Lord your God will be your everlasting light, and God will be your glory. I love that. We need the sun now. We need the physical sun to do all this work, to see, to grow, to live. Someday we won't need it. God is enough light for all of us. Revelation 7:16, there will never again be hungry or thirsty. They will never be scorched by the heat of the sun. Revelation 21:23, the city has no need of sun or moon, for the glory of God illuminates the city. The Lamb is the light. If we love the sun here in Western Washington in the summer, you're going to dig heaven, because we're going to have real light there. And then there's the real sunrise. Josh read this earlier to us. I'm getting the goosebumps. I'm getting literal goosebumps. Mark 15:33, at noon, Darkness fell across the whole land till 3 o'clock, when Christ died for us. And then 3 days later, we get the sunrise. Mark 16, Saturday evening, when the Sabbath ended, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome went out and purchased burial spices so they could anoint Jesus' body. And very early on Sunday morning at sunrise, they went to the tomb. And as they arrived, they looked and saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled aside. But the angel said, "No, don't be alarmed. You're looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He's not here. He is risen from the dead. Look, this is where they laid his body. Now go and tell the disciples, including Peter, that Jesus is going ahead of you to Galilee, and he will see you there just as he told you before he died." And there's real sunrise right there. And someday, right now we're in the noon, we soak it up. We want to do the work. We want to grow as we're called to. But someday we're going to be around the real light. And I cannot wait, to be honest. So what does the good gardener do as we're plants growing? What does the good gardener? Jesus plants us where we are exposed to God's glorious, life-giving light so we can grow strong and produce fruit. Let me pray, and the band is going to come up. We're going to have one more song. God, thank you for a chance to stand here in the physical light as well in the spiritual light. God, thank you for loving us, for caring for us, for giving us what we need, and help us to always be ready for it. Thank you, we praise you, and we want to walk and be planted exactly where you've put us so we can soak up the energy of your light, that we can be folks not only who grow in ourselves, but as we'll talk about next week, that we produce fruit that you can use to bring others to you. God, we know it's all about you. We don't care who waters and who plants, but we know that you are the one who makes us grow. Help us to be tied closely to you, to soak up the sun. In Jesus' name. Amen. 2 Corinthians 4:6 says this, "For God who said, 'Let there be light,' in darkness has made this light shine in our hearts, so we can know the glory of God that is seen in the face of Jesus Christ." May we be people who greet Jesus every sunrise, bask in his glory at noon, and trust him when things seem dark. Have a fantastic day. Sign up for a supper. Drop in your prayer requests, grab a bottle of water, and we will see you next week.